TradeSquare is Australia's first business-to-business marketplace connecting people, brands and organisations into this diverse ecosystem in a unique global landscape. Through pivoting, transforming and reshaping, Australian businesses have an opportunity to create the model for the future that aligns with the world's needs and leveraging the power of a collaborative approach. Through the TradeSquare podcast, we will bring together dynamic, diverse and thought-provoking leaders from business, government and organisations to have conversations to further enable new thinking for the future. Welcome to TradeSquare, Australia's leading business-to-business marketplace. I'm Catherine Vandermeulen, and joining me today is Katriona Lee, Global Strategy Director at Xero. How are you?
I'm well, Kath. How are you?
Good. So tell us, who is Kat Lee?
Big question. So I think for me, a big part of my identity is having grown up in Australia and spent most of my career and my life here, I guess, but also that I identify as culturally and linguistically diverse, and so try to leverage this perspective in my professional career. In terms of my professional career, I started my career as a management consultant in the early days, and then moved into industry across telecommunications, media, financial services, aviation, all covering corporate strategy and strategic initiatives. I'm currently the Director of Global Strategy at Xero and absolutely love it.
Can you share a little bit more about what cultural and linguistic diversity actually means? Break it down for us.
So for me, and I won't speak for everyone else that may or may not sort of align with this, but it's really very much about the fact that I've grown up overseas. I was brought up speaking and learning multiple languages. And so I think that I look at the world a little bit differently and bring lots of cultural aspects, cultural celebrations to the way in which I live and work and engage with others as well.
Beautiful. And so tell us about your call to adventure to joining Xero.
Yeah, sure. I've heard about Xero and its sort of rising star journey in New Zealand and Australia for quite a while. But for me, really, I connected with Xero's mission of supporting small businesses and just knowing the fact that small businesses represent 90 to 99% of all businesses in most markets. That's huge. We don't think about it that way, but they really are the economic backbone of most major markets. And so thinking about building interest in founders and leaders of small businesses, thinking about helping them take charge of the important stuff, and the important stuff being mostly pretty boring things, right, that keep the business humming, like accounting, like payroll, like making sure that the staff have a way to check in and check out every day. For me, it's about making sure that each of these small businesses feel like they've access to the toolkit to do well. And we've also recently seen an influx of new business owners and freelancers and sole traders as well, responding, I guess, to the massive shift in the Australian business landscape. So giving them a toolkit, resources and learnings to really do a good job and feel great about their success, I think is super important. So that's mainly why I joined Xero.
And you spoke about connecting with the mission. How important is it to connect to the mission of an organisation, to really believe in that core purpose of the organisation?
Oh, I think it's absolutely massive, right? You spend so much of your life and your work day doing work and stuff for others. And so if you're not connecting to the purpose, you're not connecting to their overall mission, then do you feel whole? Do you feel like you've actually, you're sharing in the purpose of it? So for me, I think, some of the ways businesses, not just in Australia, but globally, create meaning and authentic leadership and making sure that vision is something that is filtered through the organization. Firstly, it's really about following through. So if they're saying that this is their mission, are they, reevaluating whether that's working throughout the organization at a regular sort of cadence. Are they getting employees and different stakeholders within the business to buy in and getting that diverse representation? And then whether or not, leaders are checking in with everybody on a regular basis to have that conversation, and sometimes difficult conversations about whether or not a business is still on track to serve its original mission, I think is super important, because as businesses get bigger and more successful, it's really, really easy to depart from that goal. So yeah, I think, to your question, it's so important to stay focused on it and making sure that everyone is brought on onto that journey as well.
We have seen over the last 12 months, maybe even 18 months, that emergence of, as you said, kind of freelancers and sole traders. We love to call them digital entrepreneurs, because you can be anywhere and create anything as long as you've got good internet. Can you share a little bit more about that toolkit that you spoke about and how that really becomes the enabler of those sole traders and those freelancers?
Sure. I guess from Xero's perspective specifically, it's really making sure that the product is fit for purpose, right? And so the different plans and different structures of the products have features specifically designed for the kind of what we call the low end of the market, which are people that use the tool to navigate basic business functions like, tracking their expenses, understanding how they make basic payments, thinking about invoicing, all of the little things that make life a little bit easier. And so having just access to all of those things in one place, but then also being able to bolt on additional things like inventory through our partnerships network is really important. That's one side of it. Having the right tools, the actual physical capability to do the job is important. But the second part of it is around education, is having access to a community of like-minded people who understand what it's like to run a business, what it's like to face the fires and floods like we have over the past 12, 18 months in Australia, and then bounce back. So what are the things that they need to do to get up and running again? Or even just to say, hey, I'm excited about starting a new business or a side gig. How do I go about that? There is so much information. I think we're drowning, in a world where there's over-information. So how do we navigate all of that? I think, tools and solutions like Xero are one of many that help small businesses, sole traders, freelancers, dig through the noise and find the things that really help them succeed.
And so over the last 12 months, how have you really seen Australian businesses adding value to the world?
Sure. For me, I've sort of seen three main ways that Australian businesses have added value, and it's not by any means exhaustive. But I need to contextualize it by saying that, we've been very lucky for the most part because of our geographical distance and in a large part what the government has done. We've remained fairly optimistic and have seen a lot of business continue to churn as normal, which is I think quite unique, right, through this period. So the first big thing that Australian businesses have contributed to the global economy is the ability to remain quite open and trade exposed. And that's particularly true in the agricultural and raw material sectors. We've rallied, in spite of everything that's happened, through a combination of enterprise resilience. I think we're pretty gritty people culturally, and there's been significant subsidies, grants, and government policies that have really helped keep businesses running and Australian businesses continue to trade, export, and import. And some of these initiatives include, keeping freight routes open. And a grant that's particularly important is the Export Market Development Grant, for example. The second way that Australian businesses have added value to the world is that I think businesses in our region, not just in Australia, but across New Zealand as well, have really taken a more regional approach to investments and reframing opportunities as long-term and in the context of Asia and Asia Pacific more broadly. And this has been important because it's created a lot of jobs. I think, when I last checked, it was about a million jobs over the past 3 years. That's substantial. And it means that this creation of jobs builds more collective wealth for the region. It means that customers here in Australia and abroad have access to more robust data to make better choices for their businesses and their own customers. And generally, we're seeing a diversification of skills. And I connect with this particularly as I mentioned, so important to have diverse perspectives and to have people in Australia and Australians going abroad to really showcase and share their perspective on the world. And finally, I think Australia has really been an ambassador for corporate well-being and flexibility, right? We've really seen, the big banks, the big fours, done a really good job of rolling out decentralized working models and focusing on corporate mental well-being, partnering with governments and not-for-profits on education and awareness of really the quite tricky topics that COVID-19 has given rise to, such as disability, mental health, domestic violence, and just how important it is to have a robust welfare system. So overall, I think Australia has done very well, in no small part to the small businesses and the small business owners and the freelancers and the sole traders. They've all done their parts. But I think we've had a bit of luck as well.
You touched on enterprise resilience, and obviously behind every great enterprise are great human beings who are resilient, who are dynamic, resourceful. How have they really played a key role in working towards transforming Australian businesses?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's difficult to look past, the past 12, 18 months to Australian individuals that have, gone above and beyond to contribute to our changing landscape. And there are so many examples of people doing that, so I won't list them individually, but really from my perspective, particularly over the past 12, 18 months, those that are fighting the invisible causes without recognition are really people that are worth celebrating, right? Parents that are balancing contributing to the economy while homeschooling their children, just phenomenal. Frontline workers putting themselves at risk to protect others. Every member of the value chain that has put vital medical and food supplies in the hands of vulnerable populations, and agencies and individuals that are focused on protecting our most at-risk youth and creating economic opportunities for them. I think people that work at companies like Xero, have to give Xero a bit of a shout out too. I think they've been brilliant, that are collecting data to help small businesses, sole traders, freelancers, everybody really make smart choices for their recovery and access vital government funds, really help us keep Australia going. We know that through the bushfires, this is sort of the type of grit and determination that has pushed everybody through. So for me, I don't just think about individuals from a business perspective. I think individuals are also people at home, right? And so all of them, being able to continue with that sort of determination at the nexus points of balancing professional and personal lives at the heart of it, and being Australian, all of these individuals are helping us rethink our national priorities and how to work and live better and more productively going forward.
We touched on leadership earlier. What are some of the key steps that really enable Australian businesses to create more meaningful and more authentic leadership in their organisation?
Sure. I mentioned a little bit before around following through. I think that's super important. If it's about setting a goal or, creating your strategic plan for the next 3 years, it's making sure that you're always following through, getting feedback, getting inputs, and building a plan that takes into account the cross-sectional nature of your people, right? Ultimately, people are going to have different points of view. Different stakeholders are going to have different priorities. I think it's incredibly important and quite authentic, to be honest, for leaders to make sure that they're not the only ones heard, but that they are representing a wider organization that has points of view. So that's I think really, really important. And, to your point earlier around serving a company purpose, making sure everything that they do really ties back into that overall vision and the purpose and reason for why that business is around in the first place.
And what's a key message that you are super passionate about, that you are advocating and championing through your work at Xero?
Sure. I mean, there are so many topics that are getting a lot of traction. And for me, one that's sort of been a little bit sidelined is this idea of sharing. I don't think that all businesses, from my perspective, does a great job of building a sharing culture. And what I mean by that is, as companies get bigger and they get more complex and they become more matrixed, it's really important to work in silos. But what make great teams and great organizations function is that, you know, everyone has something valuable to share. So really circulating ideas, finding ways to connect, even through the noise, even through the disparate and I guess disconnected nature now of you know, working structures. I think it's really, really important to stay true to that sharing culture. You know, sending messages, checking into, you know, how your people are doing, making sure that you're showing up in a way that is open and accessible. I think is incredibly important. So it sounds simple, but it is something that I am really passionate about and am actively advocating through the organization.
And what are some of the hot topics at the Xero office at the moment that you are also excited about?
So Xero is a really interesting business. It's, you know, been around for a while. It's done really well. And a big part of that comes from being able to be agile and make decisions quite quickly. But it's also reached a stage of its growth where, you know, there needs to be structures in place because we're accountable to lots of different people, to shareholders, to customers, to our business partners in the ecosystem. So I think the question in my mind, and I think is a hot topic for lots of Xeros around the world, is how do we stay a rocket ship while introducing the structure, and how do we deploy rapid decision making in a world that's so saturated with information? I don't have the answer to that, and we're working through it. But I think for me, it's making sure that, you know, we do really build on that information sharing culture, that we do stay true to our mission, and those two things will drive the degree to which we need to be saturating ourselves with structure and format and hopefully not too much bureaucracy going forward.
And what are some of the ways that you actively challenge the status quo in your role?
Sure. For me, it's looking at building teams and talent differently. So historically, you know, we look at past performance and make an educated forecast for how that person's going to do, right? And what sorts of experience and credentials they bring to the table. But for me, I think I've reframed that from having connected with lots of amazing Xeros around the business and their pathway to where they've gotten to in their current role. You know, some have been accountants, some have been customers of Xero who have then joined the organization because they're so passionate about the mission. And others have just had amazing careers in medicine, for example, and then have joined, you know, the strategy function. So for me, it's thinking about how people solve problems, how passionate they are about small business challenges. You know, can they learn rapidly? Can they grasp complex ideas about not just accounting, but the broader world that we live in? What are some of the things that are thematically important in our economy? And what's happening around the world that's going to affect the way we need to respond. So thinking about talent, thinking about teams and building it based on real world capability is so much more important than past performance. And so for me, I think that's quite controversial. I'm not sure that everyone agrees with this point of view. And it's also something that I'm also championing through the organization is we're not going to be this next level organization if we're not thinking about talent with a really innovative, different point of view.
I look forward to seeing the evolution of that in the world of Xero. And so finally, Kat, TradeSquare has really been focused on celebrating women and the theme of choose to challenge. How do you choose to challenge?
Oh, gosh. So someone would argue that I am challenging. as a person. But, on a serious note, it's really about speaking up. Speaking up when it is difficult to do so, when, you have a different point of view to everybody else in the room, being able to kind of be quite bold and quite brave and say, hey, what I have to say is valuable and people should hear it. Whether or not ultimately it factors into the decision making, that's another story. But speaking up is the first part of solving the problem, of making sure that all voices are heard, that there is diverse representation, that we are making sure that women are connecting to all of the most important functions and most difficult problems in the business, and they get a share and a stake and can get their skin in the game.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Kat, for sharing your world and your wisdom.
Thanks, Kat.
For more information on TradeSquare, head to www.tradesquare.com.au and support Australian business economic recovery and growth with a collaborative approach to the future of business.